Hello there! First off, thank you so much for the attention and support for my Days Gone video. It's unbelievable to have so many of you enjoy the video and so many newcomers to our content here at Gamecoping. So if you're new, thank you so much for subscribing, and I hope you enjoy the content we bring you here. Once again, this video is going to offer you something different from my previous ones, but once again, I hope you can find something to enjoy in it. This time I want to take an in-depth look at one of my favourite video games of all time. Anyone who's listened to our podcast PodCoping, which you should seriously check out by the way, or has heard me yammer on about anything during our Let's Play videos, will know that BioShock is an extremely special game to me. I think there are so many things you can praise the game for. Its storytelling, its mechanics, its stunning setting, but for me, what BioShock always boils down to is its game design. Time and time again, I've gone on about how I think BioShock has possibly the best game design of all time. My argument usually is that it's because the game never stops communicating with the player. It's constantly giving the player hints as to what they should be doing without throwing the solution in their face or giving it to them on a silver platter. The communication I'm talking about can be described as this funky game design term, conveyance. Conveyance in general terms can be defined as the action or process of transporting or carrying someone or something from one place to another. And that essentially is what games have to do, right? They have to convey to a player how to get from one point in the game to the next. BioShock is amazing at this. Usually games nowadays tend to do conveyance with on-screen prompts, hints, and tutorials, and let's be honest, they all make the player feel kind of stupid. And actually, they're kind of lazy. But BioShock is intelligent, and it treats the player like they're intelligent as well. So it teaches and trains you how to play the game on the go. Hell, I bet you most of the people who have played the game didn't even realise or notice any of the conveyance that the game does. And that actually proves my point as to how good it really is. To show you what I really mean, I want to take you through a level of BioShock and dissect it. I could honestly go through any of the levels because there are constant examples of this all throughout the game, but I think for clarity and easiness sake, we'll go through the very first level because it's so good at introducing concepts to the player, then allowing them to deal with them.
Instead, I chose something different. I chose the impossible. I chose rapture.
So after what is probably the best opening sequence to any video game ever, the player arrives in the city of Rapture. They've just experienced a scary thing called a splicer assault their bathysphere, and straight from the off, before the player can even move, the game has gotten to work on introducing important information to them. The splicer attacks the bathysphere and then stops because electricity has harmed them. See? It's subtle, but that's the game telling you that whatever these things are, they don't like electricity. So you step out of the bathysphere and follow the instructions given to you by your voice buddy Atlas. You round the corner and some clever audio design from the splicer tells you that they're still a threat to you and that they're still around. And then bang! The game does some amazing things all at once. Firstly, it uses light direction for the first time. The game's creative director Ken Levine used to do a lot of theatre, so he's extremely good at directing attention by using light, similarly to how this is done in theatre. The spotlight on the splicer directs the player's eye. Then the splicer climbs up a wall, indicating to the player that the splicer can climb, which is important information. Next, some more clever light and sound direction, namely the twinkle, which the game is very good at using. The player picks up their first weapon and gets to smacking. They break through the rubble and the player can tell this wrench can obviously do some damage. Bet you know I'm strong enough to take on these weird splicer people. Let's go. Oi, hey, you don't throw burning tables down staircases. That could hurt someone. Alright, stop. This is the game telling you that there's an enemy up ahead, so get ready. Oh, I'm ready. Let's go. Let's get him. I'm gonna smack him with my wrench. Alright, so now the player knows that they can use the wrench to kill enemies. Perfect. But wait, listen. Naturally, the player follows the sound design of another human voice coming from behind them. More amazing light direction tells the player that they should go that way, and this sign shows them that weird word again, plasmid. That's been everywhere since the start of the game. What does that mean? The player goes up the stairs, when they're met with another twinkle and that familiar word plasmid. Curiosity naturally gets the better of the player, and they find out what it means.
Steady now. Your genetic code is being rewritten. Just hold on and everything will be fine.
So when the player comes to, suddenly they have electric hand. The player's natural instinct here is curiosity, so you fire it. Then, because the game has cleverly faced you towards an electric door that's malfunctioned, you think, well, I have electric hand, I wonder what happens if I zap the switch. And there you go. The player can get through the door in what is one of the first examples of the game hinting something, then letting the player use their intelligence to work out the problem. And that, in a nutshell, is conveyance. So when the player gets into the tunnel starts to break, which indicates that they should probably move quickly, and with more visual cues, with the water crashing crashing in, it directs them exactly which way to go. Now this next bit is extremely clever, but it takes some explaining, so just bear with me for a sec. Alright, so you take a look around this empty seeming room, and suddenly a splicer comes in, and then Atlas introduces the concept of the 1-2 punch. So the player does it. They zap the splicer, then whack him, and they get through the encounter untouched. Amazing, the player now knows to use that as a valuable mechanic from now on. If the player chooses to explore the room a little bit more, they consume some stuff, and the screen tells you exactly what the consequences of consuming those things are. You then beat another splicer and head up the stairs where you meet another one who's on fire. Alright, well, a 1-2 punch ought to sort them out, right? Let's go. Whoa, wait, whoa. Why you just jab something into your arm? What was that? All I wanted to do was zap him. The players just learned that the plasmids are fueled by this blue meter called Eve. When it runs out, the character you're playing as injects more Eve into themselves. The Eve hypos that the game has been giving you plenty of means that the player can deal with it. After doing that, the player still has plenty of time to deal with this splicer because they're further away, and they still get out of the encounter unscathed. Clever, right? Except what's actually really clever is the math that the game has done. The developers knew that as soon as the player got the plasmid, they would fire it. That's 1 zap. Then another zap to get the door open. That's 2. Then another to zap him and then whack him. That makes 3. Then, if the player goes through the door without exploring the consumables, they have the refill situation to deal with this splicer coming through the door. If they do have the consumables, then they have enough Eve to deal with the door splicer, but then they get the refill situation when they get to this flaming splicer. See? Developers did the maths to know how many zaps to give the player before they'd need to refill. They knew when the player's Eve would be empty, and thus the right time to introduce the concept of refilling Eve, but they did it in a way that works for different playstyles, and in a way that's generous to the player, because they guarantee they'll get out of the encounters unscathed by putting more distance between them and the splicers that they're gonna have to deal with. Okay, see, it's complicated stuff to try and explain because it's so simple that you don't even notice it, but let's keep going. Next we have another example of brilliant audio and visual design. When you're in this elevator, Atlas tells you about his wife and child, creating sympathy for him and putting the image of a wife and child in the player's head. You round the corner and you see a silhouette of a mother and baby. The player naturally is drawn to this, so they go towards them. But then...
This is happening before and none. Baby and me! Baby and me!
The game's pulled a fast one on the player. It's clever design tactics that allow the game to put the player on edge constantly. Alright, next room. Atlas introduces the concept of electrocuting enemies in the water, because we all know that isn't a good combination. Before you have time to go do the 1-2 punch on the splicers, they fall over, telling the player that this is an instant death situation for the splicers if you can catch them in it. And to be honest, this is one of my favourite things about BioShock. In every level following this one, the developers drop puddles in different places, and each time you see one, it's usually for a reason, but it doesn't tell the player. It lets them work it out from their memory. A perfect example of it is when you pick up the fire plasmid in the second level. Finally, the last bit of the level introduces the player to how big daddies and little sisters work. Atlas explains some story stuff, and then we see a splicer take on the big daddy. Safe to say he gets mauled, which indicates to the player that these big daddies aren't to be messed with. They are much more of a threat than the splicers. But then, and this might be one of my favourite things about the level, the player goes through to the next room, and what do you see? The corpse of a big daddy. The game wants the player to know that big daddies are a serious threat, but they can definitely be killed. If that isn't some seriously good communication, I don't know what is. So that's the level. Hopefully you now all see why I love the design of BioShock so much, and why I think conveyance is such a big deal when it comes to game design. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't played BioShock, I cannot recommend you a game more. You can get all 3 BioShock games in the BioShock collection, and it's more than worth it, I promise you. Also, thank you to Egoraptor. Many of the ideas and concepts used in this video were inspired by his sequelitis video on Mega Man X, which I also highly recommend if you're interested in how games communicate with players. So that's all for now. Thank you so much again for watching. Make sure you subscribe and hit that bell icon for more videos. Check out our podcast link below, and above all, tune in next time.